Get started. Thanks everyone for being here. My name's Emily. I'm the content creator at Arbite, and I'm excited to welcome you to today's webinar, a guide to using call recordings as a sales training tool. I'm also excited to welcome our guests today, Jason Pearl and Mike Boleyn of Naker Consulting. And they're going to be walking you through today's presentation and answering any questions you might have at the end. So with that, I'm just going to turn it right over to them and we'll get started.
Well, thanks, Emily. We appreciate you having Mike and I on to talk to all your followers about how important it is and how important a topic it is for sales recordings and trainings. Again, my name is Jason Pearl. I'm the president of Naker Consulting. I started Naker Consulting about 3 years ago, basically with the hopes in mind of helping multiple different organizations of different sizes scale and kind of polish their sales teams and their revenue growth. I have been in a sales role for 2 decades. I've been in a sales leadership role for about 18 years in a number of different positions that go from sales manager to VP of sales to chief revenue officer to fractional leader. I've been working with businesses and helping them scale. That's kind of always been the forte of what I do and what Mike does and what Naker Consulting was born to do. So have worked both large corporate and international banking, worked in consumer finance, worked in finance and all across the board, both B2B and B2C roles, and have been helping companies have multi-million-dollar revenue growth annually, year over year. Been doing this, love it, and super excited to kind of share with your team. So let Mike introduce himself.
Hi, I'm Mike Boleyn, executive growth strategist with Naker Consulting. 15, almost 20 years of sales experience in different roles of inside and outside sales, and working with several organizations over the last few years that use call recording. So very excited to be able to talk about this. Really 15 years in cross-functional sales and leadership experience. I have sat down with reps and I've listened to hundreds and hundreds, dare I say, probably a couple thousand phone calls over the last several years. And really excited about the opportunity to talk about this and share some best practices that we have, hopefully some things that you can take back and start using with your organization right away.
Great, thanks, Mike. Just a few housekeeping things. Obviously, there's going to be a large portion of question and answer at the end of this presentation. If you have a question or you have something you'd like to bring up, if you go down to the participants icon on the bottom search bar and you click that, you'll see 3 different buttons. The button on the right-hand side says raise hand. Emily's going to be monitoring that, so she'll be aware once your hand is raised. If we happen to answer the question during it, just hit lower hand and then she'll know not to call on you. But it's pretty self-explanatory. If there's anything specific, you can also put something in the chat that we'll all see. Emily as well will be monitoring that. So looking forward to make this obviously very interactive for all of us, so we don't put you to sleep talking about call recording for an hour. So if you want to move to the next slide, we appreciate that. So there's a number of things that we want to cover today, but the first thing is, why should sales managers care about call recording? Well, there's a number of reasons why. Obviously, this presentation is put together through the lens of being a sales manager, but there's also a lot that sales reps can get from this as well. Call recordings is just like practice in anything, whether it's a musical instrument, whether it's a sport, whether it's a hobby. The more you do something, the better you get at it, right? That's why they say practice makes perfect, although in sales, nothing is ever perfect, right? But why you should care about it is when you capture those live interactions, it's obviously very telling and very real and raw. And that is kind of what you need from a sales manager perspective to be able to provide the right type of feedback. You can role play, and certainly I know I've been a part of that awkward role play where you're sitting across from your sales rep. You're saying, hey, I'm going to be the person you're selling something to, and you be the salesperson, and let's do it together, and then we can kind of coach after that. that's certainly helpful. And if you've got a cadence that works that way, continue to do that. But both Mike and I feel very strongly about the fact that live interactions is obviously critical, because you can't fake it, right? You're dealing in a live situation with a live prospect or a live customer, and that's where you can provide some really great coaching. When it comes to businesses, and I know we may have some business owners that are on this call, verifying customer experience and also company strategy is really important. You as a leader or business owner or executive of your company, you want to ensure that not only are sales being made, right, but they're being made the right way. In my experience of, it spans over 2 decades, I've certainly seen people that had a skill to close sales, but it was not done in the way that I wanted it to be done. And oftentimes it would be the conversation of, well, hey, look at the scoreboard. This, you're paying me to sell and I just sold that. And I think we live in a world now where we understand that brand equity, the importance of honesty, and the importance of having it be done the right way that your company and the strategy of your company wants it to be done is obviously really critically important. So call recordings will do that. And as a sales manager or a sales leader, it is really our responsibility to ensure that they're being done properly. Salespeople are often referred to as the gateway to the company, right? They are the first experience that a prospect has with your brand sometimes, and maybe you happen to work with a really robust team that has a great marketing team like the folks here at Arbite do, and it's often not the first time you'll see the brand, but depending on how your organization's set up, the salesperson, that sales call or that demo that you're doing, maybe the first time that somebody's interacting with your brand, and first impressions are very important, obviously. So you want to make sure that's done the right way. Also, you're building a culture of excellence. Selling is something that, regardless if you're selling a widget or a software or a product, it needs to be done the right way, and repetition is really important. But when you build a culture of excellence, when you're coaching with your sales rep and using live call recordings as an example, whether it be through your CRM or whether it be through Zoom like we're on today, or some other format, it is obviously critically important to understand what are the questions that our prospects are asking us. How are we handling objections when they serve us up objections? And what that does is you start to be able to build a playbook of how you can maybe handle that conversation differently the next time it comes along, or to help coach not just your one sales rep that had that question, but likely those objections and questions are going to happen with everyone. So you can sit down in sales meetings and review those. So there's so many different reasons why call recordings are important, and those are just a few. Obviously, Mike and I are not attorneys. We're not here to talk about legalities in regards to what state you live in and what you have to do regarding whether it be state or federal law, but it will reduce liability. We have some friends of our organization that are attorneys, employment attorneys, that have said that, when you can reference a call recording, obviously it's very important. So certainly there's much more than the 6 that we just listed as why sales managers should care about call recordings, but these are just a few that we wanted to highlight. So as we talked about, recordings are not just quality assurance. There's a number of things that we can do. We obviously talked about, it's obvious, right? The sales coaching and training that can happen with the recordings, but talking about some of the other things, when you are a sales manager, it's your responsibility to pour into your sales reps. And each sales rep is going to be unique. And it is my opinion, I know Mike's as well, that you don't create just like sales robots, right? We live in a world today where our consumer, our customer, our prospect is more informed than they've ever been, right? They have access to websites and all sorts of things that will tell you about what are the top 5 things you should look at when you look at a software, you assess a software system, or what are the top 5 things you should do when you're looking to buy a car, or whatever the case may be. There's so many things that are out there. So when you're dealing with a rep, you want them to still have their uniqueness and their originality in the way that they sell. And you want to understand what are areas of strength and what are areas of weakness. Obviously, you want to coach up the weaknesses, but you also want to pour into them and praise them on where their strengths lie. And you want to be able to have them set themselves up for success. And that can be done by the repetition of listening to a number of their calls. If you're selling a software and maybe a demo environment is big for you, that is something where watching the demos and seeing how they transition from topic to topic or handle an objection, that's where you can really start to identify the strengths and weaknesses that come along with that. I have found 100 times out of 100 that when you do this effectively, you will see an improvement of results and performance. Also, too, what you could find, which is something that's a reality when you manage people and you lead folks, is that you also may find that through doing call recordings and trainings and identifying strengths and weaknesses, you may just find that the role that these folks are in is just not the right role for them. Maybe they're the right person for the bus, but they're in the wrong seat, as they say in that analogy. That's where going through this process with consistency and repetition is going to help you identify these areas. So certainly will improve those results, performance, or may help you identify that this is somebody that is maybe gifted in other areas, but sales is not one of them. As I talked about earlier, curating a library of best practices, companies are oftentimes calling that playbooks and setting up playbooks for how they want to deploy them to be able to increase their sales results and their revenue results, objection management, all those things. It gives you an ability to say, hey, Johnny over here is having the same issue as Sally is over here. This is something that we likely as an organization, as me as a sales leader, I need to focus on more, because it seems as though as all of my reps are tripping up on this objection, or they're struggling when it gets to this part of the sales process. That gives you an opportunity to create a best practice. So obviously retrieving any missed details. If you are doing immediate coaching from call recording, and I'm not saying like they get off the call immediately and you call them like the second later, but if you're reviewing calls maybe at the end of the day and you're cherry picking a couple calls from each one of your sales reps, you may be able to listen to them and realize that there was a portion of that sales process that they missed. And the window may still be open for you to reach back out to that prospect and say, hey, forgive me, when we were chatting earlier today or late yesterday afternoon, we missed going over this part of the product or whatever you were talking about regarding the sales process. It'll give you an ability maybe to resurrect that sale if you miss something at that point in time. So, and ultimately what this is, it's a learning process. You can't expect people, even if they have years of experience in sales, every company is unique, right? And what we say at Naker is every company is unique and success is a choice, right? So you can learn from each one of these interactions, and you can, if you look at it through the right lens, you can take it to make sure that it's going to help you either in that exact sales call that you were monitoring or future ones. And that's really what it's all about, is that we live in a world where things are so fluid. If you are so rigid to say, this is the only way that I'm going to sell, you put yourself in a box. And when you put yourself in a box, you will only succeed when you're in that one situation that you're really good at. And we know as leaders and as business owners, that's not something that we're looking for. We don't want to be a one-trick pony. We want to be able to be diverse and agile to make sure that we're providing the right type of experience for that prospect and hopefully lead them down a path to become a customer. So obviously, providing the reps with the actual call, and it should be both good and bad, right? So as a sales manager, oftentimes we get bad raps to say, we're just a bearer of bad news. What did I do wrong now, right? Like, what are you coming to tell me I forgot to do? And it's really important to balance consistency with both praise and opportunities of improvement, right? And the way you phrase those are going to be critically important when it comes to the psyche of that salesperson, right? You don't want them to feel that they're beaten down because they're going to get disenfranchised with you as a leader. It is our job as sales leaders to motivate and to build up and to pour into. And when you do all of those things, you're going to find that it's going to produce so much more for you. So make sure that when you're coaching, it is good examples and examples of improvement, and phrase them in that way. But don't white glove it either. If somebody's doing something that you do not want them to do, you have to be very direct with them. So under no uncertain circumstances, they realize when you get off of this training that they cannot do what they did on that call before. But balance the good and the improvement, and then I believe that you're going to find a significant amount of success with that. So I know Mike's going to go over some ways to incorporate, actionable items for that.
Thanks, Jason. I appreciate that. And as we transition to this, something that's important, and Jason touched on, to evaluate, and as the sales leader and as the sales coach, evaluate both good and bad, evaluate both successful and unsuccessful. Both are coaching opportunities, both are learning opportunities, and it gives you as the sales leader the ability to say how to replicate more of the good, eliminate more of the bad, and create that system. And something that Jason touched on earlier, talking about culture, you'll hear me say a lot throughout this, the culture of coaching. And I'll explain a little bit more about what I mean by that. So here's a quick disclaimer. I'm going to offer some best practices. I'm going to offer my experience on this, but we understand going into this that every organization is different. And in this recent new COVID world, sales managers are taking on lots of responsibilities. Maybe your territory changed. Maybe you're taking on more people, less people. But I'm working under the belief that know your role, that it is the primary responsibility of a sales leader to be the coach, to be the growth agent, to be responsible for the coaching, the growth, and the development of your overall sales team and each individual sales rep. Now, that being stated, it's my opinion that it should be about 1 to 2 hours per week per rep. And that includes different techniques. And I'll talk about some of those techniques, but listening to calls, live monitoring, call review sessions, group sessions, but 1 to 2 hours per week where you as the sales leader, the sales coach, are listening to calls and then providing feedback and working with your team on those sales calls, working to improve. The other disclaimer in this is that coaching and one-on-one time are two very, very different things. One-on-one should be used for reviewing sales numbers, talking about expectations, CRM management, pipeline management, schedules, things like that. Coaching and one-on-one time, two very, very different things. So when you're listening to calls as the sales leader, what are some of the things that you should listen for? Not just listen to and listen to the calls so you can check the box and say, all right, I've listened to 30 calls, but things that you should listen for. And Jason touched on a couple of these earlier. As a sales rep, are you adhering to our company's overall sales methodology and sales process? Are you taking that client on the path to purchase from your initial contact through the contract, the signing, signed, sealed, delivered, done, through post-contract follow-up? Do you know your stuff? Do you know your products and services? Can you demonstrate that knowledge? Can you, again, take that client through the path to purchase by demonstrating how your product or service will effectively help them solve a pain point in their business? Does your product or service solve their problems, and do you know how to explain that? Of course, we're all business professionals looking for overall professionalism. That goes unsaid, that people are hired to do a job, and as Jason mentioned earlier, they, as the sales rep, are the first representation of your organization. We want to make sure that they handle themselves professionally, leading to an overall good customer experience. You're going to learn from your customers and how they want to be treated, how they want to be talked to, what the feedback they have about your sales team, your organization, your company as a whole. Now, as far as missed details, I'm going to expand a little bit on something that Jason talked about before. Every sales call is a two-way exchange of information that your customer, your prospect, your client, they have things to say. They have questions that they ask. As a sales rep, you have questions that you're asking along the way. And in that exchange of information, in the heat of the moment, there are lots of details that are covered in there. It's possible while you're knee deep in that sales call to miss some of those details along the way, key details that are going to be needed when it comes time to close the sale, to make that, to make the close, to make the demonstration, to give that proper presentation of what your products and services will do for that client. Great opportunity using call recording to go back and pick up those details. So over the course of the next 2 or 3 slides, I'm going to break this down on 2 sides of things. Advice for the sales managers, for the sales leader, for the sales coach. And I keep using those terms interchangeably, and I intend to do that it's not just fair to call someone a sales leader or manager, but as part of the coaching culture, it's the responsibility to coach and develop your team. So some overarching themes here. 1, listen to several calls, get a body of evidence, pick up tendencies, pick up patterns of behavior. Anything can happen on one call to the next. We want to look at tendencies, patterns of behavior, and I'll give some specifics on that. So 1, preparedness, unpreparedness. You can hear that in listening to several calls. Assertive, too assertive, not assertive enough. Do they talk too much? Do they not talk enough? Are they interrupting? Are they cutting off the prospect? Are they relinquishing control? You'll pick these up in listening to multiple calls. Do they stumble over objections? Not just one rep, but multiple reps. And Jason mentioned that before, things that may be a training issue where they're not properly trained from the beginning on how to handle certain things. Fast forwarding to the end of the process, and what's key in this, are they afraid to ask for the sale? You got to listen to many calls to be able to pick that up. And then something, and we said we're not lawyers, but the legal advice in this, that are they misrepresenting your company in some way? Are they mischaracterizing what the product or service will do, who your company is? And even further in that, if it's an HR or company code of conduct violation, things that we want to be able to, those you may be able to pick up in one call, but we want to listen to many, get those patterns of behavior. It's also important in this to be objective. Remove any bias, whether someone is a top performer, bottom performer, middle performer. Go in with a clean slate. Don't take, while it is a culture of coaching and you're building up a performance and understanding what the rep truly does and understand how they perform, remove bias and go in with a clean slate on this. Be constructive, be honest, be direct in this, and also be specific. You can't just say going into a call coaching session that, well, that was terrible, you just have to do better than that. That's not specific coaching in that. Break down what are the specific elements that you're recommending that they do to improve their overall sales calls. And as far as the overall call, focus on one thing, maybe 2 things at a time. Sometimes your sales process may be a 15, 20, 30, 45-minute call. As a sales leader, if you're going to spend those 1 to 2 hours per week per rep, you can't listen to every second, every minute, all 45 minutes of every call. So take those coaching sessions and break them down into specific digestible bites. Okay, today we're going to focus on voice messages. I'm going to listen to 10 or 15 calls. We're going to talk about voice messages. Okay, next session, we're going to talk about call openings. We're going to talk about transition statements, discovery, closing, demonstration. Break it down one step at a time. Don't try to coach on the entire call every time, every session. I'm going to pause for a minute on that just to see if there are any questions, anything that we need to cover one more time. Okay, we'll pick back up. Some of the tendencies when I mentioned about coaching sessions is how to solicit that type of feedback from coaching questions that you as the sales leader ask your rep. So you've set up the coaching session, you've established that, you've scheduled that, you've listened to 10 or 15 calls where today was focusing on discovery. All right, we've listened to these calls. What do you think about the first 3 or 4 discovery questions that you're asking on your calls? How effective do you think they were? What do you think that we're capturing the type of information that we need? How do you feel that your customer is thinking? You've heard yourself on the call, you've heard them. How do you feel that that went. And I am a firm believer in utilizing self-reflection and self-evaluation. And you'll find that sales reps are often their own best and worst critics in there, because they're going to hear the things, they're going to hear them saying the things that you're playing back for them, that they're listening to. But using those types of open-ended coaching questions to solicit that feedback from your reps. So now we're going to flip this. Okay, now you're the sales rep, and it's understood that as a sales rep, that it's part of our organization. This is what we do here. There's no surprises. We record calls. We use call recording as a training and teaching and coaching tool. Everybody cringes at the sound of hearing your own voice, but it's there to help you. It's there to help you succeed. So for any reps going into this saying, "Oh man, I don't know if I want to hear this. I don't want to listen to my own calls. What if I make a mistake?" Hey, we'll get over that. We'll get over that, because as you keep doing that, as you keep doing it more, I found, in my experience has shown me that those that truly are looking at this as a tool, a training, a tool to get better, you'll start to crave the feedback. An example that I have is that a sales rep sending to me to say, "Hey, this call went really well. It was," and rarely does it happen in perfection, but "I thought this went great, went right through the process. I covered, I asked the right questions. It led to the type of sale that we were looking for. Can you go back and listen to that? Tell me what you think about it." That's something that I'm really proud of. Or the flip side of that, "Hey, I thought things were going really well, and all of a sudden it went off the rails quickly. Can you go back? Can we listen to this together? Can you give me some feedback? I want to find out what I did wrong. If that happens again, how do I handle a situation like that differently the next time?" So as I've talked about, playing this back, and I'm going to use, sports analogy and another one too, that as you're looking at call reviews, it's, let's talk about this from the Monday morning quarterback thing. Let's go back the next day. Let's look at the film. What did we do well? How could things have gone differently? Let's run the play back. Were we expecting that? And often the way that the quarterback and the offensive coordinator and the head coach get together on Monday or Tuesday to say, let's look at the game film. Let's talk about the plays as they happen and break things down. And I'll also use the post-mortem analogy in medicine, that, hey, things went bad. What did we do? Where did things go wrong? How can we learn from mistakes that have happened in the past? So whether it's playing back the film, the post-mortem, but it's about recreating and replicating the good and learning from the bad, learning from mistakes and helping to eliminate those in the future. So to sum up a few of the things on here, that there's a combination of techniques that can be used to really look at things from a 360 perspective. We talked a little bit about using those one-on-one sessions. Okay, we're going to schedule the time. It's going to be you as the sales leader, you as the sales rep. We're going to get together. We're going to play back, 5, 10, 15 calls. We're going to break them down together. Also in that can be an effective tool, can be group sessions. Okay, we're gonna schedule that time once every 2 weeks, and we're gonna queue up a few different calls to see, being able to garner the expertise of the entire team. And Jason mentioned this before, that you may have common themes that people do well or not do well, or certain reps that handle situations and objections better than others. To be able to combine that expertise and have people learn from each other. Along the lines of that, peer reviews. Being able to reps pairing off, and I highly recommend using the veteran rookie mentoring strategy to say, okay, hey, I've been here for a few years. I want you to listen to some of my calls as the new rookie. I'm going to listen to some of your calls. You listen to mine. I listen to yours, and we'll learn from each other here. What went well? What went right? What went wrong? How do we handle those situations? I handled it this way on this call. What would you have done differently? What would you learn from this? And you may find that combination of strategies, depending on your team, will work well in different situations. I wish that I could give credit to, I've heard this quote, I've seen it before, but inspect what you expect. And call recording gives a great opportunity to do that. Number one, as a leader of an organization, communication is key. Clearly communicating your expectations to your team. It gives your team the ability to understand what you expect of them, what they should expect of you, so that you can truly map out that coaching culture and build that process of success. And being able to say, hey, this is what we do here. We record calls, we use it as a training tool, we use it to help you get better, we use it to help sharpen your skills, and being able to truly grow your organization and grow your sales team. And that's what this is about, an up and to the right trajectory, growing your sales, improving revenue, increasing commissions, and having your, and again, I'll say it, having your organization have that culture of coaching and using call recording to do that. So with that, we've allowed some time here to have a question and answer session. I learned at the beginning when we started this that there may have been a couple challenges with people that are logging on. So if you are watching this post-recording, not catching it live, if you need to reach out to Jason and I, we would love to have a conversation with you one-on-one. Or if you're here and you have a question that, number one, we don't get to, or number two, that you'd rather have a private one-on-one conversation, we are accessible through a couple different ways, but we'd love to hear from you and talk about the situation and how we can possibly help you and some ideas about using call recording.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mike and Jason. That was amazing. And we actually did have a few questions come in. So we'll just start with a question about the group sessions that you mentioned just a little bit ago. I think the question is, what if a sales rep has anxiety about listening to their call recordings in a group setting? Do you have any advice for the sales reps to kind of get comfortable with that, or for the sales director to facilitate a setting where that's comfortable for them?
Yeah, that's a good question, and it's not uncommon to have that type of reluctance, that anxiety, as I mentioned, about hearing your own voice, or even feeling that almost sense of embarrassment. Oh man, I made a mistake. Everybody's going to know that I made that. As the sales leader, as the coach, you know your team better than anyone else. So if you have someone on the team that is a little squeamish about doing that in group settings, I would encourage starting from the beginning with that person, getting them used to hearing their own voice, and do it as a one-on-one session. Then possibly as you grow and as you continue to use call recording, start to incorporate group sessions. Also, using someone on the team that isn't reluctant to do that, and get the team around the environment, sitting around the table where that's what your team does. You know your organization better than anyone, so you have to truly understand. You don't want to put someone in an uncomfortable situation, but the flip side of that, and I will say, it is something that as a sales rep you're going to get over. You're going to work to get over, because that, if you're incorporating call recording, that's what we do here. Get over it. It's here to help you. But again, depending on your team, use different techniques based on different people's personalities.
And if I could just, if I could add a little more to that as well, it really comes down to the consistency of you as a sales manager or sales leader. I know I've been leading teams for almost 20 years, and I can remember being more of a novice sales leader. And you do certain things when, you know, maybe you're getting pressure from above, or things aren't going the way you want them to go. And they're like, okay, now we're going to switch everything up on its head and we're going to do this. For those folks in this specific example that are concerned about hearing their call in an open format, if you are consistent with it on a weekly basis, and you're doing call recordings at sales meetings that you should be having weekly or biweekly, that will create consistency. And then there's a consistency of expectation. So like Mike said, start it out one-on-one with that person to make sure that there's a comfort level. But this even gets back to some of some HR things, which is where if you're writing your job description the right way, part of what you could have in your job description is, consistent call recording and coaching, in both individual and team formats. Again, we're not here to, speak to an HR side or a legal side, but I know that the clients that I'm coaching and leading right now, I often have them add that to their job descriptions because it's something that we like to do.
Yeah, that's a great idea. And we have another question kind of on the same lines of team dynamics. Is it a good idea to have low performing reps listen to high performing reps? And if so, how should that be done or introduced without offending either of the reps?
Sure. Mike, if you don't mind, I'll take that one as well. I think it does a little bit go back to the consistency side of things. Let's take this question for for the directness of it, which is, let's say you're just starting call recording, right? And you're just starting to use this from a coaching standpoint. You could frame it in a way of, here are examples of calls that went well, and here are example of calls that need some improvement. And that way it's not best rep and rookie rep or however it may be, but then you'll find that the experienced rep that's having success is probably the rep that's seeing that has the better calls, and then you compare them together. Mike had mentioned earlier a mentoring kind of example. I think is really important. If you have a team that's sizable enough where you can pair up experienced reps that get it and see the big picture and want to help, that mentoring program I think is really helpful, because as sales leaders, again, Mike kind of explained from a sales leadership standpoint, we're taking this from a non-producing sales manager, right? So we're taking this from a non-producing sales manager standpoint. You want them partnered with people that are in the same exact roles that they are in, that maybe just have more experience, and that's going to make them feel more comfortable. So it's consistency and it's framing it in the right way.
Awesome. Okay, so another question here is, how can you avoid getting too nitpicky when listening to call recordings? And maybe is that even possible?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that's where I mention and strongly advocate where breaking down different elements of the process. That's one element of it. So it's challenging because you may hear someone that is very, very good. They follow the process, but they are an person. It's something worth pointing out. It can be considered a little nitpicky, but things that it's important to coach on. I think it's working under the assumption that no sales call is ever going to be perfect. So we're looking at our sales reps properly representing the company. Are they taking the client down the path to purchase? Are they following the plan and the sales process and methodology that we've laid out for them? Being able to hear that. Are they achieving the results that they want? And let's look for progress, not perfection. We want to see progress. We want to see good things, but as things can go as a sales leader off the rails for you very, very quickly if you get too nitpicky. I'd advise not to do that.
Yeah, progress, not perfection is a great mantra for this topic. So last question I have here is, do you recommend recording every single call or selecting them randomly? So I guess more like on the logistics side.
Sure. I believe that if you have the right systems in place organizationally, you should make it a best practice that your team is recording every call. I just think that way it gives you an opportunity to maybe pop into the system that you're using and just randomly pick some calls. The more random you can be with it, I think the more authentic it is as well, right? If they're not used to recording calls and like, okay, well, this call is going to be recorded, they're going to act differently because it's not consistent with them. So if you happen to have the system and the system bandwidth to be able to do that, I highly recommend that. The majority of clients that I work with, if they're not using a system that has the ability to record calls, I will highly recommend it. It's very difficult to put a value on success, and when you look at it that way, you can say, you know, it's very easy from an ROI standpoint to figure out, hey, if we improve by a conversion rate of an additional 5% of all the contacts we make on sales calls, the system's gonna pay for itself.
Absolutely, for sure. Yeah, so on that note, that's all the questions that we had. So we can go ahead and wrap up, but if you have any questions about Arbite and the services we offer, which by the way, we do offer free call recording if you use our phone system, you can use that email on the screen there to get more information about that. But again, thank you so much, Mike and Jason, for being here today and taking time out of your day to go over this really important topic. I learned a lot, and I'm sure that everyone else did too.
Great. Well, we appreciate your time, and you guys are great partners of ours, and thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So again, if you came in a little late, you'll receive a recording of the full presentation. And yeah, thanks guys.
Thank you. Bye-bye now.
Bye.